Looks like the Education Conference Committee members are back. I don't know if they concluded in theirs, but they're back. So first, what we're going to go through is we're going to go through the 6 items that we had delayed final action on from Thursday. And so you'll see those 6 items on your green sheet. And so the first is the Budget Stabilization Fund. We had considered to omnibus adding an additional $100 million to the Budget Stabilization Fund. Is there any discussion on that item? Actually, I think I made the comment Thursday when we were discussing this. Personally, I would like to see more go into the Budget Stabilization Fund, especially since we received the new revenue numbers. We had that briefing first on Thursday. And so I would make a motion that we transfer $250 million into the Budget Stabilization Fund. Seconded by Representative Helgerson. 200 million? No. It was 250.
I'll second your motion.
Okay, all right. Just making sure, because Representative Estes was ready to second it if you don't. Discussion on the motion. All right, seeing none, I move my motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. The next item was the consideration of paying off the 2015A and 2015G bonds in fiscal year 2022, and that was a total of $332.2 million. Discussion on that item. Representative Helgerson.
Representative Johnson, stand for question.
Representative Johnson.
You spoke about this and the need for not doing it and to do something else. And so can you highlight those remarks again?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the question. One of the directions that we had looked at going was going a little heavier on the KPERS debt in addition to the 253, and that is a position that we had taken to pay off higher interest debt. So I was trying to get a sense for where that is in the Senate. It's passed the House, and assuming that gets through the Senate, that does give us meaningful debt reduction in that manner. So if that was what you were referring to.
Is there any further discussion on this item? And what would the committee like to do in regards to this item? Representative Estes.
I move that we pay off this debt, the $332 million.
Is there a second? Second by Representative Burrows. Discussion on the motion. Representative Helgerson.
While I'd be in favor of this normally, I think that there are several issues that are still out there hanging, in particular school finance. So I'm a little leery of doing it at this time. It could always be addressed later on after we see a few other issues and see how the overall budget fits together.
Representative Estes.
I'm in favor of doing this now because the likelihood of a recession coming continues to grow. And I think everything that we can do to lower the cost of government in the future and getting this paid off is going to help us to weather the future storms and protect doing our priorities in the future.
Any further discussion? Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't mind doing that, and I certainly didn't mind adding additional money. I probably wouldn't have added that much, but it's not in this committee, but I just feel like I have to make a point for the citizens of Kansas and the axing the food tax. I would think somewhere before we leave town, we would do something that goes back directly to the citizens of Kansas. So I hope we're not going to spend all the money so that we don't have an opportunity to do that. And I realize it comes out of tax committee, but they have to have the additional money left over for us to do that. Thank you very much.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the point that we had discussed earlier, the increased revenues that we had, I think, does give us some additional flexibility on our one-time liabilities that has come in. And as we look out in the budget profile that we have, I do see that it does get narrow as we go further out in the future. And while it's hard to pinpoint those, it does appear with the revenue that came in that we would have the money to be able to pay those off in addition to what we have done. And I also really appreciate my colleagues from Wyandott's comments. Tax relief is a useful piece. I do think a good way to provide ongoing tax relief is through reducing the interest costs across the board and looking at how that can make something that goes out several years, as I do worry about how narrow that gets if we want to continue to buy that down lower. So hopefully we still have a chance to take steps towards that, and hopefully the debt reduction would give us the room by reducing payments in the future and having more margin in revenues over expenses. So thank you.
Representative Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I know I'm not the Wyandotte County person he was talking about, but I will state that it is the most prudent, fiscally responsible thing to do. Anytime we can reduce debt when we have a surplus of cash, I believe it's the responsible thing to do, and the taxpayers are looking at us to lower our revenue. So I'm doing just that.
Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Because we don't know exactly on the capers yet, I think that it'd be prudent right now for us to maybe delay just a little bit. But what I'd like to do is to make a substitute motion that we just pay off Series 2515A, which is $160,460,000, and then we will look at the other one after we've kind of had a little more chance to see what exactly happens with capers. So that'd be my motion at this point.
All right, committee, you've heard the substitute motion, seconded by Representative Helgerson. Discussion on the substitute motion. Representative Humphreys?
Could I just have a little clarification what you mean look at later? Like,
Well, it could be next year, but it also could be a little bit later in conference. You know, once we don't know exactly as far as on the capers yet how that's going to go through. So we kind of need to maybe that's a pretty good size price tag there. So this just kind of gives us a little bit more time to look at it. And frankly, it gives us a different position than the Senate. So it just doesn't automatically come in. Gives us a little bit of time to look at
so
it.
the Senate did take the position of the previous motion?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion on the substitute motion? Seeing none, Representative Hoffman, you may close.
I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Okay, so the next item, I know there was a lot of discussion on this on Thursday, and that was the consideration of transferring $10 million from the State General Fund to the State Employee Health Plan Reserve Fund. Also, the that was the GBA number 2, item 7, that was on page 6 of your yellow items. We do have some material that is being handed out to the committee members in regards to the State Health Insurance Plan Reserve Fund. We'll wait until those items are handed out to all the members. Someone's alarm went off. All right, Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I did have privy to some of this information as I checked into this, and although I'm still not convinced that this money is needed in the fund and the account, what I would propose is that we go ahead and provide the $10 million and we reduce the percentage of payment for the employees
And what
with the
percentage is
$10
that?
million.
So the 10 million would be funded and the percentage would be reduced?
It would reduce the employees' payments.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? We'll have discussion. Seconded by Representative Hoffman. Now discussion on the motion. Representative Ballard.
Okay. I was going to second, but I needed an explanation because I wasn't sure what you mean reduce the, would you explain what you meant by that motion?
Representative Landwehr.
Well, okay, it should have been contribution, should have been the words that I used, because if you look at this sheet, in 2020, there's a 4.5 state of Kansas employer, well, that was the employers. Contribution increased on employee rates. So I want to reduce the employee rates with that $10 million. When I went back and I'm looking at the history of the fund, that fund is not in crisis because it doesn't have that extra $10 million. It's been running around 43. And in talking with a couple of other board members, I didn't get to talk to the director at the time, is I don't think that we needed, this has not been brought up in HCC board meetings as an issue and as a concern. And I thought, well, if we're interested in doing something for the employees, we reduce their rates on insurance with $10 million.
Representative Helgerson.
So you're taking the GBA, but you're adding a kicker. Okay?
Yeah, we haven't heard that in a while. Go ahead.
I apologize. Representative Ballard, were you good? Representative Burrows.
Do we have an idea, thank you, Mr. Chairman, do we know how much that will reduce the employees' contribution rate to the insurance plan?
Representative Landwehr.
I do not know that off the top of my head. It was just difficult trying to get information between then and now. But I do know that when I went back through minutes and stuff, this issue for this fund had not been brought up. So I figure anything that reduces it on the employee side is a good thing for us to do. So I apologize.
Well, and I appreciate the motion, I truly do, but with a lot of things, I'd like to know what that reduction is. If it's only pennies, then I don't know how we're really addressing anything, but if it's substantial savings, I think it would be the wise thing for us to know that we have given a benefit to our employees versus just trying to move money around. That's my only concern. I do appreciate the motion and the amendment because our employees do need some recourse in which to see additional monies in their pockets, and the rising cost of healthcare is just eaten up by inflation. So I was just curious if we had any idea. And Mr. Chairman, I might ask that if we might consider holding this over until we get some information. Is there any opportunity for us to have a letter sent to us as to what this $10 million might do for the cost of insurance plan for employees?
Representative Landwehr.
Well, I felt like there was one of two choices to make, and I'm right with you on we should know a number. I don't have that number. I felt like I looked at it one of two ways. One, we don't put the $10 million in there. Everything's fine with HCC. It's not an issue. If we're going to do $10 million, then let's just give it to have it reduce the employees. If it's only $5, that's $5 more than zero. And they have been dealing with increases.
And I would say, I mean, we weren't aware of this motion until now, but time is of the essence. Really, we don't have any time to wait and get information and have it relayed back to the committee members. Representative Burrows, then Helgerson.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't make a motion because I do know time is of the essence, and I'm all about taking care of our employees and ensuring that the benefits we provide are cost efficient and are affordable. I know the fact that this motion was made just now, I'd like to see a substantial reduction or an idea as to what we know it's going to cost us $10 million, but we don't know what it's going to benefit our employees. I don't know the number of employees that it will impact. And just because we have maybe 6,000 employees, not all 6,000 of them take the insurance, and some of them may have families, some of them are individual. I'd kind of like to get a breakdown. I think it would be the right thing to do to ensure that we're hitting the mark. But I do appreciate the motion, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Representative Helgerson.
This could be for staff or Representative Landwehr. Is this usually as I remember, you're on the commission, correct? Is this a decision that's usually made by the commission and the executive branch, and the legislature usually stays out of it?
Representative Landwehr.
Yes, but it doesn't have to be. Nothing prevents us from doing that.
Yeah,
So like I said, I felt like from my perspective, Representative, it was one of two choices. Either we don't do the 10 million or we do it and we give it to the employee side of it, and the commission can figure that out. Because that's rates won't change till come January anyway.
I understand. As I'm leery of the legislature stepping in to take on your responsibilities, the commission's responsibility. And I don't know how it's structured or if the governor has an opportunity to be involved. I guess I'm going to make a substitute motion to put the 10 million in. I have some questions about the 10 million myself, but and as my colleagues have mentioned, have said they'd like to see the reduction for the employees, and I would too. But I'll leave it up to the commission to make that decision. But I think they need the 10 million in order to make that decision then in the future.
So your
I'll make a
substitute
motion
motion
to
is
do
to
the
adopt
GBA.
the GBA.
Yes.
All right, you've heard the substitute motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Carlin. Discussion on the motion? Representative Carlin.
Thank you. I had my name on the list before that motion, but I had a couple of points or questions. In 2010, we transferred almost $10 million to the state general fund from the insurance money. And I suspect that was the 08-09 recession issues. I don't know, but I don't know why we transferred it, but I know that our cost went up. But would someone tell me again what the GBA accomplishes? I mean, I want to do it. I think it's part of cleaning up our old messes that need to be done. But is it something about what does that do to our money, our overall big picture? Why is it important to do that? That was my question. I mean, I want to do that. I want to be able, I know in the future we could bring costs down for employees, or that's part of it, but are there other reasons?
I guess who you're directing your question to?
You, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I'm not going to have
I'm sorry,
the
I
answers
don't really
to that
know who
question.
to ask that of. That's why
I mean, the only thing that we were supplied with was on Thursday morning. We had the governor's budget amendments.
yeah, it's in here somewhere.
And I'm trying to look through the documents that we received.
Me too. That's my point.
Okay, so if you look on the items that we received on Thursday morning, on page 6, item number 7, stabilized the state health insurance plan reserve fund, there is the information that was sent to us in the governor's budget amendment. Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, if you look at the historical background, you can see that when Kansas was in financial trouble, they decreased the employer contribution while increasing the employee contribution. So my understanding was of the 10 million is if we ever get in a financial trouble again or in a pinch, that doesn't have to happen. We don't have to put it on the backs of the employees. And as to the motion on the floor now, I am fine with that motion, and I'd even be fine with asking the HCTCC to take a serious look at what Representative Landwehr talked about, and they would have more of the details, know what the implications were. I'm not opposed to employees' rates being lowered. I'm just opposed in here doing this without any more information. So maybe we could even add to the amendment that request that the HCC put this under consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Landwehr?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I do know is that if we look at the ending projections for the HCC, the projected ending balance for 22 is $51.4 million. The targeted reserve that is optimal is 47.5. So we're above where they feel like that we should be, and that does not take into account the $8 million in the admin fund. So that's why I believe we either put the money, even if it's a dollar, it's a dollar, is we either reduce the employee contribution or we just don't do it at all, because I do not see, and this is looking at their records, that we need that fund, that we need that money in that fund. It is adequately funded. And what happened, we're not going to be able to go back and borrow ever again from this. That's why there was a $17 million penalty, was because we took the interest from that, and the Fed said, nope, you can't do this. So we're not going to be able to go back to this again. So that's why I felt like I had one of two options. One, we don't adopt the GBA, or two, we let them put into the employee fund, or reduce the employee contribution in 23.
Representative Helgerson?
Representative Landwehr has more information than I do. I don't have a $47 million ending balance. That wasn't provided to me. Maybe it was provided to other members of the committee, but
this was, I'm sorry.
Representative Landwehr?
This was notes that I had from participating as a board member.
okay.
So my point is I don't believe that they need the money in the fund. Or we give it to the employees, one or the other. I would prefer not to put it in the fund, so I would prefer not to adopt the governor's GBA, or say in 23, reduce the employee side. And maybe they reduce it more than that, but that'll be $10 million for them to use to reduce that.
Representative Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And trying to get my head around where we are and where we could be. In the recent years, it looks like we increased the employer contribution while holding employee and spouse and family relatively constant to modestly down, just 2020 to 2022, looking at the numbers the maker of the original motion had pointed out. And with that, the cost of insurance has gone up so much on everyone that I think making the plan solvent or more solvent is the direction to go, rather than looking at finding a way to reduce that. I can't get my head around exactly what it is, but I look at a 4.5 increase to the employer, and if I look at the employer contribution increase, I think of that kind of on our total payroll, and our payroll's $5+ billion. If we've got 10 million that we're looking at, that'd be a 0.2% on a percent of payroll basis. But that still doesn't get me where I need to, because there's going to be a lot of change on that. But it seems like a fair amount of trouble to go to get to that. I'm not sure it's the direction that I'd want to go in making that change. To me, it comes down to, as we've looked at different liabilities that we can address one time with our current fiscal situation, is this one where we might be able to put the state employee health plan in a slightly better position to handle whatever volatility comes going forward. Again, could be a good place to be able to take that step, but I'd look at whether or not to take that step rather than whether or not to reduce the employee's contribution rate. So appreciate the substitute motion. Thank you.
Representative Helgerson, did you have anything else? Any further discussion?
There's
Seeing none, Representative Helgerson, you may close.
Well, I, like Representative Landwehr, have some concerns about this. In fact, if you remember, I was asking a lot of the pointed questions, and I still have questions. And I appreciate what some of the representatives have said about wanting to do things for the state employees. This motion doesn't prevent them from doing that when they meet later this year and beginning next year. It gives them a little bit more of an opportunity. And this is my political junkie side. We don't want the legislature stepping in all the time to start filling with these rates. As you know, we'd rather have a commission making the recommendations and following their good recommendations. So that's why I'm trying to keep us out of it, but give them the tools for Representative Landwehr and the rest of the committee members to make it the decision. And then I'm going to check back and see if I agreed with it or not, but let them make that decision. I move the motion.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
The ayes appear to have it. Division has been called. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes on a vote 13-7. And what I would say about that, even though the House is not in control of the Legislative Budget Committee, but I do see we do have a member of the Senate who is going to be chairing that this interim. We can have a discussion in regards to the State Health Insurance Plan Reserve Fund in the LBC. All right, the next item is the Governor's Budget Amendment, number 2, item 4, page 4, which is the updated debt service estimates for the new Veterans Home. This was an increase from $10.5 million that was approved by the legislature to $17.2 million. And I believe we do have information in regards to this that's being passed out, so we'll let Shirley pass that out to the members. And I believe also, is General Turner in the room? Yes, okay, you're right there. That way, if we have any questions, we do have you here available to answer any questions that any of the committee members might have. All right, do all the committee members have the material that's been passed out? Okay, so discussion on this particular GBA. Representative Helgerson.
I think no one in here voiced more opposition to this than me. I voted against it constantly. I don't agree with it, but at the same time, we've made policy decisions and made commitments to move ahead. And just because the costs have changed doesn't mean that we should back away from our commitment. I would move the GBA.
Committee, you've heard the motion to adopt the GBA, seconded by Representative Wolfmore. Discussion on the motion. Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think we had a lot of discussion on this last week, is how do we, because we know that we're sitting short at our other facilities, you know, that we operate. We know that our nursing homes are sitting short. So how are we going to staff this? Where does the staffing come for this new facility?
Actually, that'd probably be a question best for General Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ma'am, if you can refer, please, to the, I think it's the second to last chart in the packet that you had there that talks about licensees by county. And this just offers, I think, a little bit of insight. This is information that's in the Board of Nursing's annual report. I think it looks like this, ma'am. And the bottom portion, you can see this is by county showing the licensed nurses right now as they currently exist based on the 2021 data. Ma'am, I fully recognize, and committee members, the shortages that we are facing. We are confident, I think, given where we're going to in this northeast quadrant, given the density of licensed practitioners and then registered nurses that exist there with this new facility, that we would be able to adequately staff it.
Representative Landwehr.
Well, and I'd have to pull up the Board of Nursing on this here, but just because they've got that many licensed doesn't mean that they're all active.
That's correct, yes, ma'am.
So that's why, and I'm not in disagreement of another facility for our veterans at all. I'm just concerned that if we build this, even though I know it's a smaller amount on the SGF than it is other things that we do, I just don't see how we're going to staff it. I mean, I told you the other day, and Representative Ballard can verify this, as can Representative Carpenter and Representative Concanon, it was appalling to hear that we're using psychotic drugs in our nursing homes again because we don't have enough staff. And just because there's licensed nurses doesn't mean they're the right people to staff these facilities. So I would rather that we hold this off for a year and get an extensive study between now and then. Where would we get this staff? How would we, what type of staff is needed? How many are needed? That's my biggest concern. I'm not against the facility itself. But I also know that we're sitting with about 120 open veterans beds right now. And I know that's not all in a nice, great location. I get that. But I'm just not sure I see the need right now, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know that putting it off a year would make that much difference on whether we can have staff or not. But I do think we had asked several years ago under a different administrator, we'd asked for a comprehensive list of your beds and the shape that they were in. You know, I think some of these beds arguably are not occupiable. Would that be accurate at some of your homes, especially Fort Dodge?
And sir, I believe that the quality and what we have there, sir, is of such a quality that's suiting of the veteran there, sir. It's not that they're broken down or not needed. What we have at Dodge, probably I think that there may be some confusion about when we talk about long-term care versus domiciliary care and the types of facilities that are out there, sir. So we have approximately 115 or more bed facilities out there that are domiciliary care, but only the 57 that are focused on the long-term care. And what we're looking at for this new facility, our long-term care, it is focused in the long-term care arena.
And so those are in tip-top shape and ready to be occupied then?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Representative Ballard. Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think that what I heard, but correct me on this, was that, or I read, was that about 50% of those who need care are residing in that northeast area, and so that would be most convenient for those veterans to be in that area.
Yes, ma'am. That right now, what the numbers will show us is that well over 50% of the veterans that reside in the state of Kansas reside in that northeast quadrant. And within that quadrant, you can see the kind of the heat map, if you will, demographic that shows you that those veterans that reside there that are over 50% service-connected disability, which would lend you to believe that they may be more in need of the care that we're looking at down the road. When we're looking at this building being constructed, and we're looking at probably out into the 24 to 25 time frame, and arguably it's probably going to be kind of the peak period when we're going to have our Vietnam veterans. Right. Will be kind of maturing at an age, probably the 75, 76-year-old age. And so I fully expect and confident that we would be able to have the occupancy rates for this.
Great. And let me see, and the bonding authority, so if we didn't, I mean, that's the maximum we could reach. There's a possibility that, depending on what the land or the deal was, or there's a possibility that we wouldn't even use up all that bonding authority, correct?
Absolutely, yes, ma'am. It's up to that amount right now, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much. The other thing that a couple people mentioned to me that really had an effect on me is that the veterans often like to, rather than going to different assisted livings and long-term care locations, that they like the camaraderie of being in a veterans facility together. And I thought that was a worthwhile point. Additionally, I looked and we passed this, let me see, I think only 3 people voted against it in the House and 2 people voted against it in the Senate. So as I think someone said before, I'd like to honor the wishes of what our legislative body did last year. Thank you.
Representative Corbett.
It's like a lot of things up here, the can is easy to kick. So, but the cost of construction is just going to get continually higher. We got to either get to it or put it to bed, but just, that's just going to cost you more to do it or get it done now.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Helgerson, you may close.
Well, I'm one of the 3. But we made a commitment. You made a commitment. And if you made the commitment, you got to finance it. So I'd move the motion.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, the next item was actually something that we had discussed in committee and then decided to, I guess, punt it to omnibus. And that was the deletion of 20.7 million state general fund for Board of Regents. And we do have a handout that's going out to all the committee members in regards to the higher education budgets for fiscal year 2023. Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we did have a lengthy discussion on this, and actually it was in reverse. We kept 25.7, and we had eliminated the 20 million. And now it's like you end up keeping the 25, and now we're back to 20. I think the need is still there, especially in terms of what they had talked about they wanted to do. And on the goal sheet on page 27, there's more in terms of what they had in mind for the enhancement request for the state universities. And I think there's still a need. This would be the 4th year that we have not raised tuition. If we would restore this money as well, I think that was pretty much the language that was inside. So at this point, I would like to make a motion to, I guess for a better word, return the 20.7 million back to the regions.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Woodard. Discussion on the motion. Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an extremely difficult position that I'm going to take here, being the chairman of higher ed. But what I'm going to say is that the regents, higher ed, our technical colleges, our community colleges, they had a fabulous year when it comes to our appropriations for them. And as we talked at the beginning, yes, we do have some extra funds coming in, and some of the SGF that we put in, which is over $141 million, is one time. And that's great, because as we talked, that's really where we wanted to emphasize spending our money on this Appropriations Committee, and we're doing that, and I'm very proud of our committee for doing that. As far as higher ed goes, it was an enhancement request for $45.7 million. And there were 3 components to it, and also written in the bill was how they were going to certify that tuition was held flat. And so the Senate and the House both chose to just fund that to a certain amount. And I'm going to oppose the motion and just say, I think there was a wonderful, I think we did well with higher ed this year. I think we have funded them in some parts over and above what they even asked for. And the extra, the enhancement of that we've given 25 million, they can use it however they choose to use it. If they're not held to anything in particular. The tuition language, which is in the bill, is a little strange, like the governor's budget had holding tuition flat, which I think is a little bit different than how tuition has normally been decided. And we might need to talk about that if we don't put the money back in. But I just, I think our higher education is so important in the state. In all aspects, the Regent schools, Washburn, the technical colleges, the community colleges, the private schools, and we have done a really good job of funding them this year. And so for this particular piece, I'm going to say that I think that over half of what they asked for in that enhancement is good and it's fine. And so for that reason, I'm going to oppose the motion. Oh, I'm sorry. Can I say one last thing?
Yes, you may.
It's also not one time. This is ongoing, and we don't know what the future is going to look like. And we have added a lot of things that are also ongoing. One more thing that's ongoing, that's another one of the reasons that I would oppose the motion. So thank you.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to support the motion. When we look at the different puzzle pieces, yes, this is a very higher education friendly budget, but I think that if we're going to continue to train the workforce that's going to fill the jobs that we have open, it's not just our career and technical programs, it's not just our community college programs, it's not just our universities, it's all of the entire system working together. The entire system is only going to graduate a little over 40,000 students this year. We have almost 90,000 open jobs. We need to look at every single component of higher education to look at what do they need to make sure that we're getting students onto our campuses to make sure that we can fill the jobs that we have open. We have folks on the second floor talking all the time about all the jobs they have coming to Kansas, which is exciting, but many of those jobs require some sort of training beyond a high school diploma, and I think part of that is a four-year degree. We are still just now rebuilding to the fact where our state general fund dollars would exceed 2008 levels. We've been talking all session, all year about inflation being at 8%, but we're not adjusting for inflation at all. Our real dollars are just now getting back to where they were in 2008. So when we look at talking about making college education affordable, I think the answer is the full $45 million so that we can keep tuition flat. So I'll be supporting the motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I kind of was thinking along some of the same things that Representative Woodard said, but one thing I remember was one year we cut $30 million out of higher ed operating grant. It wasn't that long ago, but you never make that up. And when you talk about what's going on forward, that $30 million cut goes on and on and on. And we've lost so much ground because of that. We lose professors who we can't give increases to. We can't recruit as well for professors, and our students have had to pick up the load. So I really do support this motion. It looks like the right thing to do at the right time. And our new company that's coming into Manhattan is going to ask us to do a special degree that will support their business, and there will be more of that. Plus, all of our technical colleges are also, finding they have to do more things and bring in more courses to take care of the technology needs in the state. So I think when you think about if you have a $50,000 horse that needs a veterinarian, or if your wife gets cancer or your husband, you want the best and you want educated people. And we have those things in Kansas, and they depend on us to fund them. And if we hadn't made that $30 million cut, we might not be in this position that we are in right now in our universities. And I truly support the motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion on the motion? Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Been fairly quiet since the beginning of this whole process earlier in the wintertime. With all due respect to my chairman, I will take a different opinion. I will support this motion. I'm excited about what's going on in higher education. Dr. Farley is retiring from Washburn, so one of the longest term is now the chancellor of the University of Kansas. That hasn't been that long ago. And so we have new and exciting things. I'm really excited about Dr. Lynn at Kansas State. And where he came from, North Carolina State, was kind of positioned some of our universities, maybe our land grant. And I think this will also send a strong message that the legislature gets it. That while, yes, it is a lot of money, but we did a lot of work in our committee to shore up our community colleges, to shore up our technical schools, and to hopefully set the pace for our three largest institutions. And the regionals are doing great things. All the regionals will have, most of them have new presidents. Dr. Mason is now second in the tenure, which she hasn't been that long at all. And so I think, with over the years, what we've done, you would have asked me before the session, I would have said, cut it all. Because I think that some in higher education took the legislature and others for granted. But I believe they've stepped up with some of the hirings and taking a serious approach of trying to meet the needs, to fill those positions, those jobs, create those programs. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But I'm also excited about the things I hear that's going to be going on at Wichita State. It's glad that they have been at the table so strong this year. So with that, and you've heard me before, I believe in making good investments. And we've made a lot of good investments in a lot of different things. And Mr. Chairman, I believe in moving forward to put this in and stick with what the governor recommended. I don't agree with her that often. But if this is done, then tuition is froze for another year, the way I understand that agreement was made with the region. So with that, I will support the motion. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Ballard, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with one of the representatives has indicated this has been a good year for higher education. Even our chancellor mentioned in his report to faculty and staff on campus that he was very pleased with what had been funded. This is an enhancement request. And I think part of that is to be able to offer even more than we do now at the university. One of the things that I'm very proud of, and I can tell you a number of parents are, is that this will be the fourth year of this graduating class, and they were paying the same tuition that they entered in. And part of it was to hold it the same so that families could plan, students could plan, and they would be able to complete. And they have done that. That was not easy for the university to hold their tuition the same for 4 years, but we did. And part of that was to show families how much we wanted to work with them in terms of higher education and maybe making sure that they have their dream for their children or their children get the dreams that they would like to have. We passed this before we left. And it was unanimous. We did not have anyone not wanting it to happen. I would say to you, we are working hard in the region system to be the best we can be and to help parents and their children realize those. I would ask that you restore that funding as an enhancement to make sure that we're doing all we can to make higher education affordable, to not have to raise tuition, so that all of us can feel happy about what we're doing in higher education. With that, I close and I ask your vote.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
The division has been called. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Good. Oppose, same sign. Motion fails on a vote of 10 in favor and 12 against. Okay, we have the final GBA that we discussed on Thursday, and that was in regards to the Governor's GBA number 2, item 20, the salary increase for employees for the 24/7 pay plan. Were there any further questions in regards to this particular item? Any further discussion on this particular item? Representative Wolfmore.
I move to adopt the GBA item number 20.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Burrows. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Representative Wolfmore, you may close.
The reason I'm doing this is because I think we made a valiant effort to try and give raises to all employees, although we inadvertently left out some. And I might also say that, we inadvertently, I think, left out some. This will cover all of them. And in particular, with the Kansas Department of Corrections, even with the 24/7 pay plan, we still do not have them at market level. And if we're ever going to get this problem under control, I think we're going to have to move people up to market level and keep them here. So I think this covers everyone now, and so I move my motion. Thank you.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Okay, that concludes all of the items that we had as a carryover from Thursday. We'll now move on to see if there's any other items that we need to discuss for the omnibus. Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm making a motion here for the janitorial staff here in the building and in the buildings here in Shawnee County to get a 5% raise above what the governor has authorized. There are 17 employees here in the State House, and throughout Landon and whatever, there's 43 other employees. That's 60 employees. The cost would be about $150,000. Some of these employees are making $12 or less, and I would ask to see if we could take a look at this.
Okay, committee, you've heard the motion seconded by Representative Helgerson. Discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, Representative Corbett, you may close.
I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Representative Helgerson.
When we met last week, I mentioned I thought that it was appropriate since the legislature had passed SB 330 and SB 479. That's the Gold Star Families Memorial Fund and the Suffragists Memorial Fund, that we should put some money in for each one of those. So I'm going to make a motion. I can do them separately or together, $100,000, so that I was waiting. Putting in $100,000 for each one of the funds. They'll have to raise the rest privately, but that gives them some seed money.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Landwehr. Discussion on the motion? Representative Humphreys.
Thank you. Will you remind me what the total that they wanted to raise or that they needed was going to be?
Representative Helgerson.
I don't remember, to be honest.
I just wondered how you got the 100,000. Thank you.
I thought it was a reasonable figure. Usually these, from what I remember in this information, $200,000-$300,000. 100,000 gives them a seed money so that they can go out and raise the rest.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion? So most of it will be raised by private funds.
That's my hope.
All right, seeing none, Representative Helgerson, you may close.
Close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I believe that Amy probably has a handout, or she's got staff with a handout. I did have a discussion after our meeting, and it was confirmed with the budget director as well as our legislative staff. But I just want to put in a guarantee that there will not be any cap, limitations to the funding for our CCBHCs on the PPS system for 22 and for 23.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Hoffman. Discussion on the motion. Yes, Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you. I got a tad distracted. Could you please repeat? Thank you.
Okay, after our meeting last Thursday, I did meet with the budget director, and Adam, as well as JG from staff, legislative staff, and am assured that there is not a cap in the consensus caseloads for our CCBHCs. This just reaffirms that that is, in fact, what is happening for 22 and 23.
So, since I haven't read it yet, I'll just ask you a question. So, the totality of what this does is just assure there's not a cap. That's all this does,
Right.
correct? Okay, thank you very much.
Any further discussion on the motion? Representative Estes.
Question for the maker of the motion. What could our fiscal liability be here?
Representative Landwehr.
I don't think that change is not with our consensus caseloads. This is already in the budget. This just confirms that that's what's in the budget. That's all it does. So it doesn't change anything. I had to stop and think a minute where it was.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, Representative Landwehr, you may close.
And I just did want to comment, it's not any disrespect to the budget director. It's just how I kind of operate on things, making sure that we're confirming. So I would close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Representative Landwehr?
Now I'd like to spend some money, Mr. Chairman. If you recall, during the session, we had realized, and I think that Chairman Corbett has also had the same information provided to him, but we noticed that there wasn't anything in the budget really for enhancements for the state fair. And so the email that we got from the director, I would be asking for $24,550,000. The $20 million of that would be to restore the Bison building, which the fire marshal shut down because it's in such bad shape, and it is a historical building, so it hasn't been used the last 2 years. $2.5 million would be asphalt overlay, and that's the streets and the walkways that we have around the fair. If you go to the fair very much, like I do every year, you realize that there's a lot of cracks, a lot of potential. I'm surprised we haven't had more people fall. Then there's some minor renovation within some other buildings, and I could get that list. I just have to pull it up on my phone, but it's like air conditioning and some different things that are needed in the building. That's $950,000.
Please listen to the motion. Maker of the motion.
Huh?
To quiet down to listen to the maker of the motion.
Okay. Then then they need a PA system. One thing that they can't do, if something comes up out there on that fairgrounds, they have no way of communicating with the entire fairgrounds. So that is $1 million. So that's where the $24,550,000 comes from.
All right, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Carlin. Discussion on the motion. I believe the dollar amount was $24,550,000.
$24,550,000.
Representative Helgerson.
Would Representative Corbett stand for a question?
Representative Corbett.
You're chairman of the subcommittee, correct? Yes, sir. Can you comment about the need or the priority?
When we did his budget, it was probably the best budget we had. He asked for nothing, and he was a newbie, and So, like a follow-up email to the director, and he was able to come up with a list of like the PA system and some of the things that needed attention. And that's where we're at. That was kind of his want list. And I'm not that familiar with the physical, whatever at the fair. If somebody there is, that's great. But that's how it all got to where it is right now.
Representative Helgerson.
Well, I'm in the unusual position that I'm going to have to white light this. I have a contract with the State Fair and it comes up in about 3 or 4 months. So I don't feel comfortable voting for it, but I do feel comfortable stating that if you want a state fair, you got to put money in it. The State Fair has been suffering, COVID especially, because the roads have been deteriorating. Fire marshal came in and closed one of the buildings. They have not been able to generate the revenue which was originally projected that would help take care of their needs in the future. But you got to decide, either you put up a revenue stream other than just the cash they generate from it, from the admissions, or you have to decide how you're going to fund the buildings or start closing parts of it down. I see it every year, every day when I'm up there. But you have to decide, do you want to put the money in, or you're going to have another dilapidated time frame or another year or so of the buildings getting in worse shape. So I make the comment and the pitch, but it'll be up to you.
Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So they didn't request this in their budget? And did they request any of this funding from ARPA that you're aware of?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
I
They
can answer
did.
that. They did.
And may I ask you, Mr. Chairman, was it denied?
Yeah, it did not qualify in the scoring system.
Do you have any background? I mean, can you remember any of the specifics of it? I mean, I hear $20 million because the state fire marshal shut
No,
the
the
building
one-
down, but I don't understand the breadth of the issues, I don't guess.
Well, I would say the one item that I believe that was in the advisory panel was the PA system. And I think it was, and we had this discussion earlier today upstairs, is it probably should have qualified, but it depends on the wording and the language that's used in the application, and that leads to the scoring of it. And so because of, I think, some of the language, maybe because of the director being new, the language wasn't appropriate for the scoring according to the ARPA definitions. Now, I will say, and I think the next individual, Representative Hoffman, is going to agree with this as well, because he was also chairman of the Ag and Natural Resources Budget Committee. And when I started in the legislature in 2013, I was a member of the Ag and Natural Resources Budget Committee. And these are items that, and Representative Carlin, of course, was the ranking. These are items that we've been hearing about every year from different director over the last 10 years that I've been in the legislature, and we haven't addressed them. And I do agree with the maker of the motion. I think it's gone to a situation now where we let a building sit that actually has some historic and architectural value, and the state fire marshal has come in and closed it because it's a danger. And if the state's going to own property, we've got to take care of our property. I mean, this building almost had to come down because we let it deteriorate so bad. So the knowledge that I have of the items that are needing to be addressed on the Kansas State Fair is because I sat on the Ag and Natural Resources Budget Committee for 2 years? Or 4 years? 4 years. 4 years. No, 2 years. I don't know, 2 years. So that's where we've heard testimony about this when I was on that committee, and I'll let Representative Hoffman speak as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, when I first took over, we weren't putting into the fund even the amount of money that we were supposed to be putting in order to keep up the normal repairs. And throughout the several years that I was chair, we were able to start at least getting that fund back to an appropriation going to it. But we have not put really any money into the state fair as far as any really big improvements for quite a while. And the chairman's right. I mean, every year they'd come to us and say, we're going to need money for this and this and it. And they've been able to kind of through some private donations and things like that to increase it. But if we're going to have a fair, which I believe we should, I believe the fair is an important part of what we provide for our citizens. So I think the money's available. I think this is a good way to get some improvements going, and then hopefully through the things that we've done in the past, we're now the money that's generated through sales on the sales tax. It goes back to them for them to be able to hopefully do some improvements. Hopefully, maybe even this money can be used as as seed money a little bit too, for them to go out and maybe get some more donations. So I hope that we're able to do that. I also hope that the fair will, and I can't remember exactly if this ever went through, but I know that when, it's been quite a few years ago, they looked at, believe that ever totally, do they have it now? Okay, so they do have it. So, with this money, hopefully with the foundation, they can go forward, and this is probably just one of the many buildings that need to have some work done on, but this one definitely is the one that needs the most. And from what I've seen, it'll be a great space when it's all said and done. It'll be a space that that kids can really see agriculture in use. And I always laugh how quickly our kids, even kids that grow up on a farm, and if they're not really just hands-on, they lose that knowing what we do in agriculture very quickly. And so I think that it's important for us to continue to promote agriculture in every way that we can. And so I think this is a good idea to do this at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you refresh me? Did we send money to the state fair last year in lieu of because they were closed for COVID, or is that 2 years ago? Or
that was actually in 2020 because they were not able to have a state fair, and so they had still employees, and so we did have to recoup some money for the state fair just for operating expenses.
Okay, and then I just had a comment that I think it's admirable that we have an individual that's a legislator that's abstaining from a vote on something that would affect his or her business, and I think that's great. I think we need more of that. Thank you.
Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think today's a good example where we can show that we support something, maybe if we don't vote for some funding, and that's okay. We support the state fair this year by letting them have alcohol all over the grounds. Is that the silver bullet? I don't know. I didn't vote for it. A couple of years ago, we tried to help them by let them keep the sales tax on events on the grounds. That helped a little bit. To me, I think this is a larger conversation. There's been discussions for as long as I can remember, long before I was ever a member of this body, on that particular facility and the state fair. I mean, I just don't know if I can support this. I mean, I know we do have the money. I am a supporter of the fair, and I have been. I don't live a half hour away or down the block. We live about 3 hours away, and every year we go there. And when I was growing up, that was a thing. Even when I lived in other parts of the state, we would spend at least one weekend at the state fair as something. And I don't know if that's that way anymore. I know that this current fair board, the new director, has done an admirable job. But I really think, and I appreciate the maker of the motion, but I think this is a larger discussion as we look at the future of the Kansas State Fair. We're not Minnesota, we're not Iowa. Those are two of the bigger state fairs a lot of times we look at and try to model after. Well, we just won't be there just because of the population and things. Agriculture, Kansas Agriland, in the Pride of Kansas building does a very good job of teaching education and doing things. But I can also speak out of the side of my mouth and say, yes, this would be a nice enhancement. That would be very good. It is unfortunate that through the process of the changing of directors that a budget request wasn't gone through the proper channels. I had a conversation, a couple of them, on what to do, going through the different ways of utilizing some federal money, and for whatever reason, those didn't come to fruition as they thought. But, you know, it's up to the committee. Do what you want. I just think we need to have a larger conversation on the state's role with the Kansas State Fair moving forward. So I'll leave it to that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. This is one of the biggest problems, not the biggest problem, but just the way Kansas is. The people who live here don't really appreciate what you have. And if you want to make this a tourism attraction, something your state's proud of, you have to take care of it. And just because the new director maybe didn't understand it, it's time to get that building fixed, or it may get to the point you can't fix it, and then it's even worse. So I think it's a boost to the area around there, and there's not much you can do in this state to show it off. We're an ag state, and if you can't be proud of what you got, maybe you shouldn't be elected. So fund the damn fair.
Representative Carlin.
Don't know how to follow that one. You know, I've sat on that committee. I believe I was appointed in '06 to the Ag and Natural Resources Budget Committee, and the state fair has been neglected, and it's gone downhill. And it's, you know, it may not be something that we can all look at and say, wow, we need to do more of this, because it's really done so little of it that it's just not looking as good as it should. But the 4-H kids, their house has no air conditioning, or it's broken or whatever, it needs air conditioning. That's part of this. And as I'm riding around on my little Bubba here with my scooter, you know, if there's a bump in the street, you could fall. I mean, it is very dangerous. And so the overlay, I think, is very important. And we haven't had a PA system. What if there's a tornado coming or something? You've got all those thousands of people we don't have. These are reasonable requests. One of the things that I want to talk about has been mentioned, but we did offer the sales tax could stay, the state sales tax could stay with the fair. Well, what we've learned is their big ticket items are things that are delivered to them at home. So there's no state sales tax on many of the big ticket items. I know there's a group selling mattresses and that kind of thing. Those are ordered and delivered. So it has not paid off as well as we expected it to. And prior to that sales tax benefit that we gave them, we were supposed to fund, I believe, $100,000 a year, which at this point doesn't seem like very much money, but we stopped doing it. We just didn't transfer the money to the state fairs for several years. So I feel like I'm very disappointed that they didn't get any ARPA money. I really feel like that it was deserving. If there's any way we can modify as we move along, that would be fine with me. But I think we need to address this Bison building. It was a beautiful building at one time, and I don't know, it's a lot of money to rehab it, but you either have to rehab it or you take it down, and that costs money too. So they need the facility. Our kids, being in 4-H is a big deal for kids. It's a lifetime learning experience, and city kids or farm kids that are in 4-H learn so much, and I think we just need to encourage them, and this is one of the best places for them to get experience in doing their very best at their projects. So that's why I'm supporting, Mr. Chair.
Representative Owens.
Thank you. Well, we're going to go ahead and beat the dead bison here a little bit longer. So is the bison building the same thing as the bison arena? Am I understanding that correctly? The $20 million request, is there a very specific laid out plan? There is?
Yes.
Okay. It just seems like looking at pictures of the building, that's an awful lot of money for that building. But if there's a plan and people are confident in that plan, then that's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to agree that the fair is important, that the renovations are important, and hopefully that does contribute to the economy of the state. I think the price tag was $24,550.
Million. 24 million.
Millions.
I do the same thing.
What's a zero to?
Yeah, it's no big deal.
I would just comment, I said it was important, and I will vote for it because I believe it is important. But I think the 25 million I was trying to put back in for enhancement for the Board of Regents was important as well. We had the money, and we will have the money to do what we can for the fair. We had the money, or we could do it for the Board of Regents as an enhancement. And we could have helped families, and we could have helped students in the process. We chose not to. I'm not vindictive. I will vote for the fair because I believe it's needed, and they need to do repairs. I also think the enhancement for the Board of Regents was extremely important. We had the money, and we could have done that too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any more discussion on this motion? Seeing none, Representative Landwehr, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can give just a little bit more on the building. This building was built in 1937, and one of the architectural features, besides the natural lighting that it provides, which is unusual for buildings like that, is the wooden barrel vaulted roof that it has, so it is a gorgeous building. This would then be used for the Ag Innovation Center, which would be used year-round to educate all ages and highlight Kansas agriculture and the future of agriculture for the state of Kansas. They would be working with the state Kansas Agriculture Education Coordinator curriculum so that they could create programs that would be taught statewide about agriculture, commodity groups, where food comes from, the farm-to-table process, job opportunities, et cetera. The State Fair facility rental staff will work also with the Visit Hutchinson to secure larger events, because people think that because the fair isn't operating, those buildings are used for other things. They're rented out for other things. So they look at, they'll be able to attract more events to come to the, use that building for more events that they can have. Let's see, the 950,000 on the building renovations, that would deal with air conditioning in the 4H Sentinel Hall and the Oz Gallery. They weren't able to use the Oz Gallery in '21 because the temperatures in the building, the previous fair, were so high that volunteers left the building and people stopped coming in. The fair, I mean, for me, it's a sentimental deal. I was raised with the fair. I attend the fair every year. It's where I spend one of my vacations. It is also a revenue generator for the state. The people that come in, they stay at hotels, they shop at our stores, they eat at our restaurants. As you heard Representative Carlin talk about, is that the sales tax benefit we thought we were giving them was not as big as we thought because of the large ticket items. And we're talking farm equipment, boats, RVs. They're delivered. So the sales tax is paid wherever they're delivered, so they don't get that. It's only on the smaller items. I do know that the foundation board is getting better organized and is trying to be structured so that they can support some of these things. And I think they've got some long-term plans. And I think that our new director, unfortunately at the time, he did not realize, Brian wasn't aware that he was supposed to come in with an ask list when this happened. So he's feeling very bad about that. He was happy to come here and explain this to all of us. But I think that he hit the ground running when the fair started last year. There was no, okay, you're going to plan all, no, he had to hit the ground running, and I think he's done a phenomenal job. And I think that he's going to do a better job in the future, and we can continue to ask him for more and more information, and I think he'll supply it to us. So at this time, I would move my motion.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. We were supposed to be on the floor at 4, but we've just got notification that we've recessed until 4:20, so we're going to continue. Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a couple of provisos. The first one, I think that Jill has handed out. Thank you.
Could you please describe your proviso?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As you know, we've gone through extensive process with the Spark Fund monies and all the federal monies, and we have the base grant program that we have delved out quite a bit of money. And what this proviso does is provides transparency for that, so that Kansans can know who applied and what for and when and who was awarded the base grants.
All right, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Helgerson. Discussion on the motion. Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So your motion just makes the applications and who was awarded money public. That's all this does?
Representative Tarwater.
That is all this does, and I'm sure you can do it through a core request, but I've been asked several times about where it all went and how it worked, and so I think that we could have them put it on a website and everybody can see for themselves.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions or further discussion? All right, seeing none. Representative Tarwater, you may close.
I appreciate your support, and I'll close. Thank you.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The second issue I have is regarding a bill that we passed last year out of Commerce, and it became law. It was HB 2391, and it had to do with the Department or the Secretary of State, and it had to do with, instead of annual filings for businesses, it was biannual filings for businesses. That came with a pretty hefty reprogram, and the Secretary of State uses he says, ASS 400. So they need at least another 10 months for reprogramming in order to to make that work. And so I would like to propose a proviso that would extend the start date of that from January 1st, 2023 to January 1st, 2024, so that the Secretary of State can do this correctly.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Burrows. Discussion on the proviso? All right, seeing none. Representative Tarwater, you may close.
Again, I appreciate your support in this quick fix, and I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion passes. Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee, if you remember last Thursday, we had a little discussion about KDADs. They asked for $250,000, $500,000, all funds for 8 employees to monitor the waiver program, the 7 waivers that we have. There was an Office of the Attorney General, Inspector General, I'm sorry, report that says one of the recommendations, KDAD should allocate sufficient staff needed for administrative duties to allow HCBS program managers to properly provide oversight for each waiver. Another one, HCBS program managers should access KEYS, ImageNow, MCO websites and be trained on the system. Another one is conduct yearly program reviews to identify individuals that should be removed from the HCBS waiver program, similar to the project conducted in 2016. So I would make a motion that we restore that funding. The 8 employees and 500,000, 250,000 all funds, or 250 SGF and 250,000 all funds.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion, actually seconded by Representative Wolfmore. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Representative Carpenter.
I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes. Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That same day, we had discussion on the mental health hospital located in South Central Kansas, Sedgwick County or whatever. And I spoke out of turn that there was some matching money, and in fact, there, to my knowledge, talking to folks from that area, there is no matching money. So I would withdraw the matching money request and allow the 15 million to remain in the budget.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Landwehr. Discussion on the motion. Representative Helgerson.
So is there a discussion anywhere about what's our annual operating costs?
Representative Carpenter.
No, this is very preliminary.
But the 15 million is for construction?
Design, build, just the first plans, the first phases of it. Then they'd have to come back for the rest of it.
Okay, I'll just, again, I'll raise my objection. Maybe this is a great idea, and we're talking about the idea of having them put up some match money. Now they're saying there is no match money. And I've looked at the documents. You know, please tell me what population they're going to take care of. Yeah, I know they're mentally ill. Are they long-term mentally ill? Are they homeless population? What are they trying to solve? I understand, but I can go at length of all these questions, and no one has answered the questions yet. You know, you're going down a path that, you know, has real financial significant consequences. And at least we should have had a document that says we need $10 million for a planning document. And then what's going to cost for a new hospital, $100 million or whatever it's going to cost. And then to operate it, it's going to be such and such. And we hope that it'll take care of the need for Larned. You know how many, I had a conversation with someone, how many employees Larned has supposed to have? Close to 1,000 people. And I think it runs, is it 50% vacancy right now?
600.
63.
Yeah.
And you're going to start another hospital. And how does this mesh with Larned? And how does it mesh with the real problems that we have out there and the lawsuits that are just waiting to nail us? You know, I understand that there's a need down in Wichita to deal with some of the things. And I just wish somebody would stand up and answer all my questions. But what we're going to do is put more money there. And I know it's going to be a planning down the road, but, you know, for those of you that remember, we used to have Rainbow in Kansas City, over in the Kansas City area, to deal with short-term needs. And it got closed for some reason because I think it was because of bad policy. We need a hospital system that is focused on providing community services, not a hospital system or a hospital that wants more employees or more economic development for Sedgwick County, or how to deal with those individuals that are suffering from alcoholism. You know, those are the kind of questions that should be asked before you ever go into this. And they haven't been asked and they haven't been answered.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe this was the hospital that we talked about it the same day after we talked about having to pay $180 an hour to temporary nurses, and that's how this would most likely have to be staffed in the short term anyway. This was the hospital that had no plan. It had no place, no building. And I reluctantly supported this because of the match, because it would cause the rest of the community to step up as well. And only to find out that not only is there no plan, but there's also no match. I think that if we take the match part out of this, that 17 or 15 million or whatever it is going to do nothing but grow over the next several years as a plan develops, and we're going to end up spending hundreds of millions of dollars like we do at Learned. I have a concern with that. Now they don't have a match. I think that we leave the match in there, and I bet you they find a match. And if they don't, then it doesn't happen. Simple as that. I'll oppose the motion to take out the match. Thanks.
Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there, for the maker of the motion, is there a specific plan on how this $15 million is going to be spent? Specific plan on how this will be spent?
Representative Carpenter.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. So you guys all know that I'm an incredible proponent of the need of a mental health institution in South Central Kansas, a hospital, call it what you will. But this is no different to me than the $160 million that we were going to give to higher ed without a plan. And this is a plan that we've asked for. This is something that we've all wanted, that many of us in South Central Kansas want. I've sent emails to county commissioners. I have requested information. I don't have information. So why are we going to just blindly send $15 million out there when there's no plan to utilize it, and we have no idea what they're going to come back and say? Because I can see what happens. Well, you gave us $15 million and we spent it on A, B, and C, so now we need another $75 million because we don't want to waste that $15 million that we already gave you. I completely agree that South Central Kansas needs regional mental health beds. I 150% agree with it, but I do not feel like the legislature was provided with a plan this year to deal with it, and that is terribly unfortunate because this is a great year to deal with it. And so, Mr. Chairman, I would make a substitute motion that we appropriate $250,000 so that they can do their planning, their architectural, get some drawings, get some information, plan, work together to bring us back a plan for next year in lieu of spending $15 million blindly.
All right, committee, you've heard the substitute motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Johnson. Any discussion on the substitute motion? Representative Landwehr.
Mr. Chairman, I think, first of all, there's been a lot of misunderstanding on this. This is not a hospital that Sedgwick County has asked for, demanded, or expect to build or to buy. This is a new state hospital. It just happens to be in Sedgwick County. And we heard last week why that is. It's because of the population and where the majority of those people in that surrounding area go. The $15 million is to require to do some acquisition, some engineering, possibly help seed money for acquiring the land, et cetera. What I would like to do, if we really want to hear in detail someone that understands this a lot better than I do, I understand it when it's explained to me, but this is not my arena, is I would like to ask for lobbyist Jason Watkins, who represents the county, who's in the room, if you would allow him to explain what's going on, and then it's not through a third party, please.
I normally don't do this, but I will allow it. So, Mr. Watkins.
Jason Watkins on behalf of Central County Commission. That better? Yeah. Jason Watkins, Sedgwick, representing Sedgwick County Commission. Mr. Chairman, we have sent some information out. There was a 30-some page document that was shared with all 165 legislators a few weeks ago. And then I know there was a document that came at the end of last week that had KDAD's letterhead and Sedgwick County's letterhead that should have gone to everyone. One thing that I think there's been some confusion on, what Sedgwick County is willing to do is work to build the facility. KDAD's doesn't want to build the facility. So the county has put in a Spark request to acquire land, help build the building, and then the county would turn that piece of property over to KDADS. I want to be very clear. Counties don't operate state hospitals. States operate state hospitals. So I can't stand up here and tell you what the operational plan is for a KDADS state hospital. We don't have that expertise. It's not what we do. If we're curious about how it's going to be ran, KDADS probably needs to talk about the operational side of it. What the county is willing to do, again, is help build that facility. The county's also investing millions in a crisis center, homeless outreach, behavioral health and drug addiction services and counseling. All of that is going on a campus in Wichita. The state hospital doesn't need to be on the campus. It just needs to be in the region. Sedgwick County doesn't even care if it's in Sedgwick County. Put it in Heston. Put it in Butler County. Put it in Harvey County. The region needs a facility. It's your second largest county. It's your largest city. And the closest state hospital is 2.5 hours away. And those beds are full, by the way. The other thing I would mention is when we had a meeting recently with the secretary, we expressed to her that if KDADS doesn't want to run that hospital directly, we don't have an issue with that being a third-party contractor. I think there's a company, WellPath, that has spoken with some of you. They could operate that facility. So again, we're happy to build the facility with Spark dollars or other appropriation. And that's why the 15 million, I think it's an appropriate idea to appropriate that 15 million, Mr. Chairman, and have State Finance Council have to be the ones that release those funds. If there's a $40 million Spark request that is fulfilled, State Finance Council should just lapse that 15 million. If that Spark funding comes in at 25 million, that 15 million is going to be needed to complete the land acquisition, the engineering, the architectural design, and the actual building process. So I do appreciate the opportunity. I wasn't planning to speak, so I don't have anything in writing for you. I think the final thing that I would say is there's been a lot of talk, Mr. Chairman, about where is this going to go? Well, we have to go through an open, transparent RFP process. So we don't have land picked out. If we did, a developer would go buy it and then sell it back to us for twice what we could have bought it for. So there will be an open RFP process that the county will go through on that land acquisition. And happy to answer any questions if I may, Mr. Chairman.
I think you're pretty thorough, and I know it was an impromptu to have you come to the podium, but we did know that you had some ideas of what the plans are and what's going to be doing if we would move forward with this in Sedgwick County. So thank you, Mr. Watkins, for addressing the committee. Any further discussion on the substitute motion? Because that is what we're on. Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was just taking a look at that one-page document, and it appears really that this $15 million is contingent on other funding that has to occur out there. Now, originally, I like the idea of matching funds because I was under the impression that the counties, that there would be some type of regional support for these beds. But now we're finding out that no, this really is a complete, in essence, a new state hospital. And the $15 million, according to the letter that I was just reading, would be used in the event Spark dollars were added to be able to build this facility. But it still seems to me, based on what I heard, again, I want to be very clear. I think this needs to happen in South Central Kansas. I just don't think the details have been worked out well enough for us to know what to expect, or at least have the funding from the Spark dollars, or to know whether that's going to come to fruition or not. And so I'm going to hold off. I'll go ahead and let other questions happen for a minute while I ponder on this. Thank you.
Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I understand it correctly, though, the State Finance Council would have some say in this $15 million, as well as KDAD. So it's not like we would just be handing money over to some entity.
I believe Mr. Watkins made that point in his comments as well.
Okay, so, I guess we've got to put a little bit of trust in our agencies out there to take a look at, where would this be at? Like you heard, we're talking South Central. It doesn't necessarily have to be Sedgwick County. We just consider Sedgwick County is kind of the center hub that goes out and, all around it and picks up South Central. That's why we have a South Central delegation. We don't have a Sedgwick County delegation because we picked up all around it. So if there's a hospital that someone has in one of their other communities, they have a building ready or they got some land that's preferable and it's a good location, it's got the services readily available once these individuals are released, because that's the other thing that we deal with. They have to have services available to them when they are released. I would say that we go on with the original motion and not this one here, because the funds aren't going to get released until there's something viable to move on. It's not going to get built in the next year or even 2 years. This just moves it down the road because we have to have the beds. St. Joe via Christie is at max capacity. They're actually above capacity. Wesley doesn't want to take these individuals. We are running short on services in the community, and as you heard, Osawatomie and Larned are full. We've got no place to put these individuals. Otherwise, they just become, we've got law enforcement guarding them in a hotel room somewhere until we can finally get a bed for them, and that's where we're at. But we're probably 2 or 3 years down. We couldn't even staff a hospital tomorrow. So I would oppose the motion.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Helgerson.
This committee today, it's the first time I've heard anybody say this is a new state hospital. Up until this time, as many times as I've asked, it's been a facility, and no one said it's going to be a state hospital. You're going to have to decide if you want to own a state hospital. Now, do we need more beds in Sedgwick County? Little history. Mental health reform that I wrote the bill for. We had in a need for beds down in the catchment area for Sedgwick County, but we've never done that, because the legislature hasn't chosen to do that, and because what was then SRS didn't put a plan together. We need beds of different types for different populations. That should be first question. We do not need a building per se. We need more community services. We need to evaluate the people right now that are in Sedgwick County walking on the streets or that the police pick up, and we need to have case managers work with them and find out what services are you providing right now and what are you not? Those are the kind of services we need right now. And I'm not going to quibble with the county on whether or not they've provided those services, but actually this mental health reform law states that that is a requirement of their license, that they're supposed to provide those services. I get a quizzical look. It is the community mental health centers, that they are to provide those type of services to that population. We need more services down there, and we need some beds. But if this is an issue that's being driven by the state agency, then the state agency should come to us and say, here's the document, this is what we want to do, this is where we want to move, and this is what the overall cost is going to be down the road, because we're going to have another $100 million facility down there. If I brought this idea to you and said, I want to build a new hospital such and such, you kind of question it. And I'm just saying, we should expect and demand the same thing. Even if we say that Sedgwick County may need this, and we should give them $15 million, and we have connections with people down there. If this was your money, would you give the money away this way?
Okay, we're going to have to pause debate on this because we want it on the floor. So we're going to be in recess, but after we're done on the floor, we're coming right back into committee to finish this up. That was made by Representative Owens, and I thought Representative Humphreys was in the room, but I think she had. I don't know. Yeah. All right, there's Representative Humphreys. Substitute motion.
Or more. Okay.
Could I ask the maker of this substitute motion a question?
Yes, you may.
I appreciate the motion, I appreciate the substitute motion because seems a lot of uncertainty going on with the main motion. And I like the idea of some sort of study or get some solid plans but who would that $250,000 be going to? Because I don't really even understand, I don't know even who the 15 million is going to, which if you know that, I would appreciate the answer to that too. Thank you.
Representative Owens.
Great question. I just figured we'd have uncertainty with 250,000 instead of 15 million. I mean, really, it's a very valid point because at the time I made the motion, I didn't have the answer. Now, what has been really quite fascinating about this conversation is even after spending some time talking to people, there's still so many questions and so many variables. Come to find out, Sedgwick County is in the process of kind of creating an entire mental health complex down in Wichita that's going to house ComCare. It's going to house transitional housing for mental health people. That's going to do a lot of things. It's not going to have a state hospital. Okay. And that's where Sedgwick County, I guess, from what I understand, has gotten really involved in this, is that they're willing to build it. They don't want to own it. So in essence, they're willing to make it part of their kind of their master plan, may not be at the same location. With the ARPA funds that they have requested, I believe it was $44 million, they would facilitate all the building, everything else, because KDADS doesn't want to own the building, apparently. That's what I'm gathering out of this conversation. So it comes back to what makes sense at this time, right now, with $15 million or with $250,000. And I'll be completely honest, I don't have the answer. I think that having additional oversight, I don't know if that is a committee. I don't know if that is the State Finance Council ultimately making final decision on the spending of this money. I think there's just more conversation that needs to happen at this time. And so for the time being, I'm going to withdraw my substitute motion so that we continue to have conversations over the motion at hand and maybe see what plan comes out of it, because we need to talk more about it.
All right, so you're withdrawing your motion, and that's fine with the second?
I can always bring it back again, my friend.
I will accept. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So we're back on the original motion by Representative Carpenter. Representative Humphreys.
So could I be refreshed on who is getting the 15 million? Who are we appropriating that money to?
Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's in KDAD's budget.
But it's also subject to State Finance
Council appropriations.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Helgerson for a third time.
Now thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, so KDADS is going to have 15 million, and they're going to give it to the Sedgwick County, dependent on Finance Council authority, for the planning and the building of a building they don't own.
Representative Carpenter.
I'm not sure that's been decided yet. So I think that one of the things is that they don't want, and I don't blame them, they don't want to operate it, and they're looking at third-party operators, and I don't blame them at all. I think that's a good idea. I think that's part of a wise use of our money, quite frankly, is to have somebody else operate it.
Representative Helgerson.
It may be. It may be wise to have a third party operate it, but it's not my phone. That's the whole point. This kind of a discussion should have been presented, should have been had the discussion with the committee and lay it out clearly. To have it on at 5 o'clock in the Appropriations Committee, and we don't know where the 15 million gets going or how it's going to be used. Hell, it's not the best use of our money. You know, let's force the agency to do the planning that it needs and to come back and say, this is what we need.
Representative Landwehr.
Okay, I think some clarification on this, that they will own, they can own the building, but they don't want to build it. So hopefully, the building would happen with Sparks money. That's the goal. So then KDADS can decide, is it one that they want to run or do they want to do a third party? And as we heard from the lobbyists from Sedgwick County, an RFP would be involved, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can't just say, okay, here's how it's getting set up. So I think the State Finance Council is not going to release any money without having something before them to protect the state. I mean, it's that simple. You either want another hospital or you don't.
All right, Representative Carpenter, you may close.
I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The noes appear to have it. Division has been called. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion fails on a vote from 5 to 13. Okay. Further discussion on Representative Helgerson. Yes, we are.
During our last meeting, I brought up the question of the bonding authority that's available to the LCC for the sports fund, and whether or not the 80%, how much of the 2 million that was projected, what kind of bonding authority and the limitations. I think Jill has some information she can shed to the committee, if that would be all right.
Jill, did you want to share some information with the committee?
I asked the question of the reviser who did the original bill and asked if there was a limit on the bonding authority. And the answer is there's no limit in the statute. However, the bonds would have to be issued under various infrastructure financing statutory limits, such as STAR bonds or TIF bonds. TIF bonds, So they would be subject to the authority limitations or expenditure limitations contained in those acts. So unless you would know the exact specifics of the project, there's no way we can project specific limitations. But they would be whatever the limitations are under STAR bonds or TIF bonds.
Representative Helgerson.
The reason for the question was if they're only getting $2 million, they can't bond very much. But under TIF and STAR bonds, and Chairman of Commerce could correct me, I think they have the opportunity of issuing hundreds of millions of bonds for those contracts, for building new facilities. And that was the point I was making. And it doesn't need legislative approval. It means that the LCC would have the authority to do STAR bonds and other bonds independently from the legislature for sports facilities.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you. I think the current sports wagering bill gives the authority of the State Finance Council or the LCC, one of the two. I think it's the Finance Council, but that only outside of the star bond issue. If there was a star bond issued, it is up to the Secretary of State's discretion, or Secretary of Commerce's discretion, I'm sorry.
All right. Any more on this topic? All right, Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if it was within the star bonds, there's no limit on the bonding?
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you. So, yep, so star bonds are based off of projected sales tax for the star bond area that they draw, whatever it would be, and the businesses that are expected to grow in there. And so your limit would be the bondholders would only pay what they feel like they could get over a 20-year period. They're capped at 20 years, and they're paid with the sales tax that's generated in that star bond district. And we made several changes to the star bond bill last year that kind of hone in and tighten up the requirements. And so it, you know, there would have to be some pretty good reporting done in order to get it approved, and it would be limited by the sales tax.
Could I ask a clarifying question?
You may.
Thank you. So the bonding authority just is kind of given over, and it's dependent on the bondholders who figure out about how much that this particular star bond area is going to produce.
Representative Tarwater.
So there would be an extensive report done by a third party that would make that decision as far as how much the star bonds could produce and what they would be worth, and then when they go to sell them, it then would be up to the market to bear whether or not they would buy them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're not on a motion. We're just discussing components of a bill that hasn't even passed the legislature completely yet. Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for clarifying that. I was getting settled, and I apologize. It was difficult to get set down here quickly. But I wasn't sure what we were doing. Was there a motion? It's my first question. You said there is not. But I don't understand, and I'm not on Commerce anymore, but I was on Commerce and Economic Development also when we established star bonds rules. And I know there's been a few changes, but are we getting the cart before the horse to talk about bonding authority before we have a site and eminent domain and all those other things? And as the Department of Commerce approved this project, I don't.
As I said, technically what we're discussing has passed the House, has not passed the Senate.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, we are getting the horse in front of the cart in front of the horse.
So as long as there's no motion, I'm happy to discuss.
Yeah, there's no motion on the floor.
But I think that we are going pretty quickly in a direction that we may not ready for. Thank you.
Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee, for your indulgence today. I think we all thought this would be done a lot earlier, but I do have a couple of things. The first one, Mr. Chairman, is a proviso that is dealing with dairy. Kansas continues to grow their dairy herds, and some of these came to light very late in the session. And so this is kind of in preparation for the next legislative session as we look at making more enhancements in research. But I am requesting $350,000 for the Kansas Department of Agriculture to do a needs assessment determining the impact of additional research that needs to be done and moving forward for the dairy industry in working with the research institutions. And this is the start. I mean, I think the reason why this kind of came late in the deal is because of some of the funding that's gone to Hilmar. Hilmar is committed to coming to Kansas. And so as we look at moving forward to the next session of enhancing dairy research in the state, this would be a good start.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Tarwater. Discussion on the motion. Representative Helgerson.
What type of dollars?
$350,000, sir.
State General Fund?
Yes.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Rogers, you may close.
I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Good to do it later today.
Representative Rogers.
Mr. Chairman, one more, and And I know we've been here a long time and have other events, but I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the base funding. And if you had a chance to look at the geographical distribution of that, wasn't much that came to western Kansas as far as based on the number of projects. And we had several projects, but through that process, really kind of came up with one, not in my district, so don't say Rogers is trying to pad his own people. There's a company called Goodland Tech, not to confuse with the Northwest Kansas Technical College. Goodland Tech is a company that works with MasterCard and brings high-tech jobs. They have about 15 right now. What I'm requesting was $1 million. They requested just shy of $4 million through base. They were not accepted. Total project is $5.2 million. They have secured $1.2 million in other funding already, localized funding. So this is almost a match. Not asking for the full amount they asked earlier, but for $1 million. What this $1 million would go is they're expanding. It's kind of one of those companies that has started in a garage in a sense. They're moving to downtown Goodland and refurbishing a century-old building with new windows, new, I won't say sustainability, but using some of those practices and revitalizing, and then they're going to bring in more jobs. The tech folks from Denver are coming out further on the high plains to Goodland. These jobs are averaging about $70,000 to $75,000. And so asking for this to help them on this renovation project and get it moving forward.
And this SGF?
Yes.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Highland. Discussion on the motion. Representative Corbett.
Could you go through the number of employees again, and is it a private company?
It is a private company, yes.
And is Goodland itself have any skin in the game?
The one Goodland itself, there is. I know through the area, they have secured $1.2 million of funding of the $5.2 million. If we can give them that additional million, that's almost like a match. So they already have skin in the game, and then go out and find other ways to face it. They're looking at adding probably, well, it depends. I mean, up to maybe 70 more these tech jobs, and these aren't making widgets. I mean, they're doing programming and some other things.
Representative Williams.
Okay, thank you. I want to follow up on the question that was just asked. So kind of, would you outline the types of incentives they've applied for and received? If they're going to revitalize an old building, I am sure it's probably part of a neighborhood revitalization plan. That means that they get up to probably, I think, 95% tax abatement for 10 years for any improvements. So they probably have that. What other local incentives do they have? You kind of alluded to some amounts. And what did they apply for at Commerce? Any types of incentives that they have, so we can get an idea of where they are.
Representative Rogers.
Thank you. The way I understand it is they applied for $3.9 million for the base grant. And so that, and then the local match total was 1.3.
So we don't know.
Representative, I don't know what other incentives as far as the project, as far as what all little things they have done. I mean, I've got a list. I don't have a list of all the.
So the only thing I would just add for the committee is that when you have something like this and it's coming into a community, there are a wide range of tools, economic development tools that are available to him. It's not dependent on base, that they didn't receive their base grant, yet there are many others directly from the state through the Department of Commerce that aren't related to base. And then there are even more that are local, including the property tax abatements. And I know those NRPs can be a substantial help. So I just want to make that point.
Representative Carpenter.
So to Representative Rogers, will Commerce monitor this? How will the disbursements go?
Representative Rogers. Well, I would I'll answer that question, because when we approved the $100 million in the State Finance Council from the ARPA funds that went to building a stronger economy, which is what the base stands for, it was administered through the Department of Commerce. So I would gather that this would be funneled to the Department of Commerce and funneled the same way as the grant awardees are receiving the money that was appropriated of $100 million.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Representative Owens.
Thank you, and for the maker of the motion, this is a bit of a unique situation because there was a process through BASE and ARPA and all the other money. So tell me a little bit about these folks. Who are the owners? Are they local? Do they have, how much of their own skin is in the game? How much have they invested in the company? What's the viability or the guarantees if we give them this $1 million? Help me out.
Representative Rogers.
How long you want to be? I mean, come on.
$1 million is a lot of money in my book.
It is, and if you want to go into some other things, we can. This is as far as the local born and bred, I don't know. I don't represent Goodland. This is what I know. They chose Goodland before all this happened. As most entrepreneurs, most finding a place like Goodland because of their technology with high-speed internet availability. Goodland did some incentives to try to find folks. They have skin in the, I don't know the exact dollar amount. I don't have their financials in front of me. But I know the folks of the Northwest Economic Innovation Center did a lot of work with a lot of companies that look to expand. And so this is an expansion. This isn't a startup as far as, well, this is an idea we hope succeeds. They looked at this as an opportunity to expand their business and to bring some of their friends that come like they did from the Denver metro area, trying to get away from all the things that are going on in Colorado and finding a place close there if they want to go ski, but they're now in Kansas. And so the guarantee, I think we can find any number of things that we invest in state dollars. There's no guarantee of anything. And so I think this goes through the same, a limited process of what BASE did. So commerce is still involved. Again, I think the bottom line is, in not to use fairness, but let's be honest. Why was Western Kansas shut out on so many projects that they made the efforts? That's, you love our taxes, you love us to pay our property taxes, but when it comes to and whether it's filling out the whole process of going through BASE, I heard lots and lots of stories of how difficult that was. And so this is one of many projects that we'll see if it works as far as to make that investment in Western Kansas. Technology, which we have made a lot of investments in the state to do that. This is one, as the late John Golden would say, is on the top side of Kansas.
Representative Owens.
Follow up, if I may. Look, you're preaching to the choir. My county didn't get a single one of them either. And that's why I think this transparency thing we did a little bit earlier might just open some eyes as to the way some of these things were done. And I look forward to seeing that and really to understanding it, because I do understand the frustration. My concern, I suppose, here is in the omnibus process and the appropriation process. I guess this is unique to me that we're hearing about an incentive for a specific private company. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we've heard this before and I don't recall. But this is just a very unique scenario for me. As an entrepreneur, as somebody that has been part of this, never in my life have I ever thought about turning to the state in a situation like this. So this is all very, very foreign, which is why I ask a lot of questions. Because as an investor, if they have a viable business, I don't understand why they can't go out there and raise funds. There's angel, there's venture, there's tons of different ways. So it's this. So understand that this is very unique from my perspective to sit here and listen to this pitch. When I hear a pitch from a business that wants an investor, those are just a few of the questions that I answer. So thank you for answering what you can.
Representative Corbett.
Would there be anybody in the gallery from the Department of Commerce who could shed any light on anything here?
I don't think there is anybody.
Rachel's here.
Oh, Rachel's here. Are you wanting her to shed light on the base process
If she's heard anything, I mean, if
or of this company?
this company.
No, she cannot. Representative Landwehr.
We're kind of trying to look for something right now, because, Mr. Chairman, this is not in my area, but I know that Representative Armberger actually discovered where one was awarded for, was it Great Bend, Barton County,
Great Bend.
but it's not really legit.
Correct.
So there's, okay, so then you understand it. So I think there is a problem in this whole entire process, because if we find out with one, there's probably others that are out there. So I'm a little bit concerned with us. You know, it's almost to the point where it probably shouldn't even happen. And maybe you can elaborate on, Mr. I don't know enough about it to discuss it. I just know that she brought it up, and
Well,
that's my
the
knowledge
one
of
thing
it.
that I will elaborate on is I share the concerns with Representative Rogers that for some unknown reason, well, actually, I shouldn't say unknown, for some known reason, that was what was expressed to individuals in the western part of the state as to why they didn't get any funded. And I don't think that's exactly fair as to why their grant applications were not funded because of this one particular item. And you are correct. There is a lot of questions about the cybersecurity business from Great Bend that when you're in a community of 13, 14,000 people, I mean, you know everybody. You know every business. And nobody has ever heard of this business in Great Bend. And it's come to some light from those that I've talked to in the city of Great Bend is that it's actually an individual from an eastern county of the state. And they were told to submit an application using Barton County. So there's some issues with it, and that's why I agree with Representative Rogers. I don't think the western two-thirds of the state should have been excluded. I don't think Representative Owens County should have been excluded. My county had 4 applications that were not awarded. There was an issue. No. There's a lot of issues with the awarding of the base grants. Representative Helgerson. All right. Any further discussion? Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. So this is a one-time grant to this company. Thank you. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Rogers, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for an indulgence committee. I know the hour is getting late. And on a typical year, if you will, we've talked about how this is maybe unique. I think it is. If it wasn't for COVID, if it wasn't for the influx of the federal money, this would not be a discussion. And that's why. Of all the applications in not only my district, but particularly Northwest Kansas, I asked those that worked hard on these presentations, give me a top 3. This was one of them, that looking at how we want to grow the state with good paying jobs, as the folks that do live in Goodland, they're part of this community. They want to revitalize a key building downtown. And I think they're looking at every source through any of the 2 or 3 economic development programs and the Department of Commerce. And so this is unique. This is a one-time situation. And I think, and again, they asked for almost $4 million. We're asking for $1 million. They have 1.3 committed from a local match. So I ask for your support in supporting a project of technology in Goodland. So, Mr. Chairman, I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? No. The noes appear to have it. Noes do have it. Motion fails. Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The hour is late. I'll be brief. I just want to inform the committee of my intent to request a letter to be drafted for an interim committee to study the state needs for inpatient psychiatric hospital beds. Such topic that this committee will review should include and not be limited to the current mental health bed capacity across the state, the ability to staff the beds currently in existence, the future needs for additional beds in their operation, and various other models that the state can utilize to build inpatient capacity throughout the state, community, private hospital beds, contracted psychiatric providers, and services provided in the community. And I have one representative for sure that I would certainly encourage him to be on that. I'm not going to mention any names, but I think that representative might even know who he is. So anyway, with that, I just wanted the committee to know that. I do have one other small thing. This is a proviso. I think we have a handout for it, but it's okay. It's small enough. During the fiscal year, June 30th, 2023, expenditures made from the above agency, KDHE, to the Infant and Toddler Program account, Tiny K, in the State General Fund in the amount of $6 million. This is already appropriated and all that kind of stuff for the purpose of aid to the local units and other assistance provided, however, that no such monies shall be expended for administrative costs incurred by the above agency. And what's happened is before, when they've gotten funding, which was a long time ago, the agency, KDHE, had came in and took almost half the money for administrative fees for that. And this prevents that from happening. This will be the $2 million that we appropriated will go to the Tiny K program administration. I don't know what they're going to do with that, but there's not to be any administrative fees out of this. That's what that says. So I would make that motion.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Corbett. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Representative Carpenter, you may close.
I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you, committee.
Representative Concanon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So currently, committee, there's a pilot program that happens in Johnson-Wyandotte County that facilitates the CARES network, which, if you'll recall, we had a bill. It was House Bill 2632. And I would like to ask for a proviso that would, let me see what I want that wording to be. To implement an extension of that program under KDHE with the extra training provided by KDHE and the exam reimbursements. And I am asking for $757,000 is the fiscal note.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Wolfmore. Any discussion on the motion? Representative Humphreys.
Yes, just to understand, this is just an extension for the pilot program in Wyandotte County, Wyandotte and Johnson counties?
Representative Concanon.
To extend it statewide.
To extend it statewide.
Mm-hmm. It would reflect what the bill said this year for just 1 year.
Uh-huh. Okay, well, I'll just have to say, I mean, y'all, I spoke against the bill on the House floor because it has to do with children under 5 that we have Adrian's Law, which now says that investigators have to get eyes on the child. And then this takes it a step further, that there has to be a report to the CARES network, which is a network of specially trained pediatricians, and then an examination. And I just think we need to see how Adrian's Law is working, what is happening with that, because we don't know. And then I find it the $750,000 that we're expending, we're paying for the training for the pediatricians we meaning the state, and then the pediatricians are getting reimbursed for those examinations, which are 2 and 3 hours long, and this is children under 5. And that kind of raises a little bit of a red flag for me. And also that we're paying for the training and then they're getting reimbursed for those very expensive examinations. So I'm sure the representative will be able to answer some of those questions that I have. But again, the committee will decide what they decide, as happened on the House floor. But I just wanted to raise the fact that I feel like there's still some things about it that we don't know. And we're talking about really young children and long examinations. And I don't know where the parents are during those. And then it's training pediatricians to do this extra thing. So I feel like there's enough red flags that it's not something that I can support. Thank you.
Representative Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you were close, but not correct in the billing mechanism. So the KDHE would have funding, the $757,000 would go to KDHE. The bill actually is just for training of the physicians out in the state. So there are a lot of physicians in the state who see a lot of child abuse, but have not been trained in how to recognize it or how to recognize what's not abuse. There are some physical conditions that that cause some issues that may look like child abuse. And this process has been able to exonerate some of those accusations. And it's been in place in Missouri for 10 years. So we do know a lot about the program. The reimbursement to the pediatricians is not a 3-hour visit. It is a very brief look at a report, and then from that report, then they indicate whether the child needs to go to the emergency room immediately, whether it needs to see their primary care physician, see a care network physician, or possibly see no one at all. That's what they are, just like a clearinghouse type. But then what this actually does is set up the training for the physicians out in the state, and then provides for the payment to those physicians, and those are the appointments that are long appointments. The training is very extensive by pediatricians who have been doing this for years. The bill also indicates inclusion of the children's advocacy, how am I saying that, representative, the CACs. And it includes pediatricians in Wichita. The pilot program that exists now is just Wyandotte Johnson County, and it includes the pediatricians from Children's Mercy, and they are the experts. I agree with you that we need to know more about Adrian's Law. I absolutely agree with that, and I've tended to not want to call that bill extended Adrian's Law, that many people called it. I called it the CARES Network Law, because it's different. Laying eyes on a child is one thing. The fact that they need a physical exam is another. The fact that they need an exam is already in law. That already happens. It's in law. This bill just provides finances for the training of the physicians to identify child abuse.
Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I deeply appreciate it. I know it's late. So that is really interesting to me. And so this does not reimburse for the long exams. There's none of that funding that's in this, your piece of it.
Representative Buchanan.
Yes, it does. It reimburses the physicians who have gone through the training. They have to go through the training.
Yes.
Before they receive that reimbursement.
Okay, I understand. And I think the training is actually a good idea. I'm sorry the state has to pay for it. I think that maybe pediatricians, because they'll be benefiting, can pay for it. But I'm happy I'm happy that the states, I'm happy they're getting the training. But my question, the pediatricians are being trained?
Representative Kincaid.
Okay,
No.
okay, sorry.
Primary care physicians out in the state are being
Okay.
trained by the pediatricians.
I see. Okay, which I think them being trained is a great idea. Then they do a report. There's a report that they are able, that they review to decide if there needs to be a further examination. And what the reimbursement is that piece where they are looking at that report? Or the reimbursement is the actual examination?
Representative Kincaid.
I want to understand. I'm trying to.
Okay, well, I feel like I've explained it twice in caucus and then on the floor, but here we go. They are reimbursed, the pediatricians are reimbursed contract with the state to do that work. So they are paid an amount to do no, they don't do the training. The pediatricians contract with the state to do those reviews that get sent to them.
Yep.
And then they make a recommendation of what needs to be done. They recommend that back to DCF, and then those, once they are seen by a physician who has taken the training, and the training has been paid for, then they do the long exam, and they are reimbursed for it.
By the state?
Yes, by the state.
Okay. Could you add that we would get a report after this first year if we're just funding it for 1 year? Could you add that to the proviso that we would get a report?
Certainly.
Okay, then let's do that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was against this bill. I think I voted against it on the floor. But after learning more about it, I think it's a very good idea. The Chairwoman Kincannon was kind enough to allow me and a constituent to come testify earlier last week about an instance where the mother and father were falsely accused of abusing their child. That woman, that family was divided, and they took their kid. They took their second kid just in case. False accusations. The poor lady reached out to me for help, and I thought I could help. She signed a document that allowed me to review the case, and when I reviewed the case, I was furious with her and her family, and I called her up and told her I was not going to help her, and that I don't think her kids should be given back to her. She also reached out to Barbara Boyer at the time, Senator Scooble, Ed Eilert, the commissioner, the county commissioner, for help. Called our governor, and still hasn't received phone calls back. And I thought that this lady was crazy, and I told her that. Two years later, she got her children back. One of them was abused in child care, in the foster care system, got addicted to drugs, and tried to commit suicide. I think that if we can give parents any additional benefit of the doubt to keep these children in their families, we can avoid other representatives from making the grave mistake that I did by looking past the fact that this was simply a lady that lost her daughter. And she wasn't crazy, but she was crazy because we made her crazy. And I'm going to support this motion. Thanks.
Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did we pass this bill in the legislature?
Representative Kincannon.
Yes, we did,
When?
this session, this year.
So we passed the pilot. The pilot has not been,
We passed a bill, and then the Senate didn't get it out of committee. I mean, they didn't deal with it. And then it was part of a conference committee report that I found out today the Senate has used for something else.
Representative Highland.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you're asking for funding for this, not only be for those two counties, but to make it statewide at this point?
Representative Kincannon.
Yes, that just for a year, to extend it out into the state for 1 year. The bill that we passed set it up and funded it entirely, but I'm just asking for this as a proviso for a year.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion on the motion? Representative Estes.
I have a question for clarification. So you want us to fund something that's not enacted?
Representative Kincannon.
This proviso would enact that training program. It would extend it to the rest of the state. The proviso does.
And it doesn't need the law that passed out of our chamber to pass. This bypasses that.
Yes.
Thank
yes,
you.
just for 1 year.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Representative Kincannon, you may close.
I just really appreciate your attention to this so many times and would appreciate your support. Thank you. I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Any further discussion for the omnibus items? Actually, I think I have been in talks with the chairman of the tax committee, and I believe, Jill, you have language on a proviso? You don't have it. Okay, well, we may have to, he said he sent it to you. Never mind, committee. We'll talk about that later. Any further discussion? Representative Landwehr.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just had staff put together a one-page sheet just for us to have for our file on the motion we passed earlier on the new state hospital.
Right. Representative Carpenter.
Mr. Chair, just very quickly, so I guess in the conversation that we were having over the 15 million, could staff tell us if my original motion was to remove the match, is the 15 million still in there or not?
You just removed the match. The 15 million is still in there.
That's what I thought too, but
That's how I took your motion.
that's what I thought too, but I've been told differently and I wanted to find out for sure. So it is still in there without the match?
No, with the match,
With the,
because your motion failed to remove the match.
Okay, so it's still with the match. Okay, thank you. All right.
any further discussion? All right. I want to thank the committee thank committee on Thursday and today's discussion in regards to the omnibus items. Representative Ballard.
I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, I'd like a motion to revisit the Regent's budget of the 20.7 million, and I would like to restore 15 million of that SGF for the enhancement request.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Landwehr. Discussion on the motion? I think we had a pretty lengthy discussion prior. Seeing none, Representative Ballard, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The hour is late, and I will close, and I think it's just as important right now as it was probably 45 minutes ago. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. This time the ayes appear to have it. Division has been called. All those in favor, raise your right hand. And those opposed? All right, the motion passes on a vote 11 to 10. Now, is there any further discussion? Representative Owens.
Can I just, we just had this handed out. We clarify that the 15 million for this is still in there pending a matching grant. Was there some further discussion as it relates to this being handed out, or was this just purely informational?
I took it as purely informational.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay. Since there is no further discussion, I want to thank you again for Thursday's discussion and today's discussion. And so we are adjourned. Thank you.